This is CNN Breaking News.
Hello, I'm Wolf Blitzer. It's 1 p.m. here in Washington. Wherever you're watching from around the world, thanks very much for joining us. We're following breaking news. Look at this. Live pictures coming in from the House of Representatives chamber, where members just moments ago voted to pass the massive Republican tax bill. It's a $1.5 trillion bill of tax cuts and reform, and it marks the first major legislative victory for President Trump. Later this afternoon, the president will welcome Republican leaders over to the White House to celebrate the victory. Let's bring in from the White House our senior White House correspondent, Jim Acosta, also from Capitol Hill, our congressional correspondent, Phil Mattingly. Jim, first to you. What's the reaction so far you're hearing? The president clearly was very, very thrilled by this development.
That's right. The president was touting this victory earlier this morning over here at the White House, meeting with his cabinet. This is now a signature legislative achievement for President Trump, no question about it. But instead of selling this policy before passing it, they passed it, and now they're going to have to sell it. And that's what you heard from the House Speaker earlier this morning on the morning talk shows, and that's what you heard from the president earlier this morning with his cabinet. Here's what he had to say about this tax cut package being passed.
The passage of the massive tax cuts and reform. It's a lot of reform in there, but the tax cuts supersede. And I said very specifically, use the word tax cuts. You know, for 34 years, they've been trying to do this, and they haven't, and they use the word reform. Well, there is reform, but I said we're going to be talking about tax cuts. This bill means more take-home pay. It will be an incredible Christmas gift for hardworking Americans. I said I wanted to have it done before Christmas. We got it done. I want to thank all of the leaders. I want to thank Mitch McConnell. I want to thank Paul Ryan and so many other people. And we'll go through the official ceremony in a little while when they come over to the White House.
Now, the president is planning to have some of those Republican leaders over here at the White House later on this afternoon, 3 o'clock. We understand the event will be on the south portico of the White House, Wolf, although some of those details are still being worked out. The question, I think, this afternoon is whether the president just takes a victory lap and sings the praises of this piece of legislation, or is he going to take questions from reporters? We're still expecting at some point for the president to hold one of those year-end news conferences, as presidents often do before they head out for the holidays. And of course, Wolf, this White House and the Republicans up on Capitol Hill, they're about to test the law of unintended consequences because there were hardly any hearings on this, because there wasn't much discussion in the public about this tax cut bill before it was brought to passage and on its way to the president's desk. They are going to have to find out whether or not they can turn the numbers around for this piece of legislation, because as you know, the polls have shown, including here at CNN, that it is deeply unpopular at this point, Wolf.
Deeply unpopular, but it did pass the House of Representatives just moments ago, 224-201. Let's go to Phil Mattingly. He's up on Capitol Hill. So walk us through the final vote. What happens next, Phil?
Well, Wolf, this wasn't an expected vote. Obviously, this came up because Senate Republicans ended up having to strip out a couple pieces of their bill last night, forced the House to vote again. But I was speaking to one House Republican earlier who said, look, I had no problem voting for tax cuts the first time around. The second time is even better. So there was no drama here. What we knew was going to happen is the House was going to vote to pass and clear this bill. Then the bill will be enrolled and it will be sent over to the White House. And that's going to be a process that takes a couple days. We don't know exactly when the president is going to sign. But as Jim noted, buses are currently waiting outside for Republicans to get inside and head to the White House. They are ready to celebrate their first major legislative achievement of the year, and they're going to be doing that in just a couple of hours, Wolf.
They certainly will be over at the White House. We'll, of course, have live coverage of that. Phil Mattingly, Jim Acosta, guys, stand by. We'll get back to you, but I want to stay on Capitol Hill right now, get some reaction to all these dramatic developments. Joining us now, the Vermont Independent Senator Bernie Sanders. Senator, thanks so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
Let me get your reaction. The president is about to hold a victory celebration over at the White House with the Republican leadership. This is a huge win for him, right?
Well, it is a victory for billionaires like Donald Trump. It's a victory for wealthy campaign contributors like the Koch brothers. But this is a disaster for the American people. According to the Tax Policy Center, at the end of 10 years, Wolf, 83% of the tax benefits go to the top 1%, 60% of the benefits go to the top 0.1%. This whole policy is based on the fraudulent theory of trickle-down economics. And that is, if you give huge tax breaks to large corporations and the wealthy, somehow the middle class and working families benefit. Problem is, That theory has never worked. It didn't work under Reagan. It didn't work under George W. Bush. Certainly didn't work recently in the state of Kansas. This is a payback for wealthy campaign contributors, and I think the Republicans will rue the day. And they may be celebrating today, but I have the feeling that next November they will not be celebrating quite as much.
Is there anything, Senator, in the bill you support?
Sure, there are proposals that help the middle class, but they expire at the end of 8 years. What Republican priorities were about is giving permanent tax breaks to large corporations. Some of them will get tens of billions of dollars in tax breaks, but the benefits for the middle class were made temporary. Furthermore, and this is really important, listen to what Speaker of the House Paul Ryan is saying literally today, this morning. This is what he is saying. He is saying that, in so many words, this bill drives up the deficit by $1.5 trillion. Remember, the Republicans used to hate large deficits. This drives up the deficit by $1.5 trillion. How are they going to offset that? Listen to what Ryan says today. What he is saying is they're going to come back very shortly with entitlement reform. Please, America, understand what he means by entitlement reform. Those are cuts to Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. Remember, during the campaign, candidate Donald Trump said, oh, if I'm elected president, there'll be no cuts to Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. That is exactly what Ryan has in mind, and I challenge the president. Maybe for once in his life, keep the promises that you made. Tell Ryan and Mitch McConnell that you will veto any legislation that cuts Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. It is obscene to give tax breaks to billionaires and then cut these programs that are life and death for the middle class of this country.
And the president, as a candidate, did repeatedly say no cuts to these entitlement programs, Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. He often said that. We know that the speaker has a very different perspective on those entitlement programs. A lot of conservative Republicans do as well. The speaker was also on TV this morning, and he also said this. Listen to Paul Ryan, Senator.
The tax rate before this bill passes is 35%. That's the highest in the industrialized world. The rest of our competitors tax their companies at about 22.5%. Canada is 15%. Ireland's 12.5%. England's 17%. China's no higher than 25%. So when we tax American businesses at much, much higher tax rates than our foreign competitors are taxing theirs, we're losing and they're gaining. And what's more important, American businesses are moving overseas. They're not even American companies anymore. This is a trend that has to be reversed.
All right, so you heard the speaker. The corporate tax rate is going to go from 35% down to 21%, and that will give these corporations a lot more potential to go out there and create jobs, get higher wages for the working class, for all the union workers out there and others as well. That's something you support, right?
In theory, I do. Unfortunately, what Ryan said is grossly misleading. What he said is the tax rate is 35%. Wolf, that is the nominal tax rate. The vast majority of corporations do not pay 35%. They keep saying this over and over again. The fact is that the real effective tax rate, because of all the loopholes that now exist, is somewhere around 16 to 18%, not 35%. In fact, 1 out of 5 major American corporations making huge profits pay 0 in federal taxes in recent years. So what Ryan is saying is simply not true. Nominal rate is 35. The effective real rate is significantly lower than that. Now, the second point is what these guys are going to do is lower taxes essentially for corporations that invest abroad. Yes, we want to bring jobs back to America. What they are doing is exactly the opposite. They are making it easier for corporations to go abroad and pay lower taxes than staying in the United States of America. So I strongly disagree with him on that principle. In order to get jobs to companies to reinvest in America, among other things, what we have got to do is change disastrous trade policies, which make it easier for them to go to Mexico and China and hire low-wage workers. This tax policy will not help that process. It will likely hurt it.
In his cabinet meeting just a little while ago, the president spoke about other consequences of this legislation now passed by the Senate, now passed by the House. He's about to sign it into law. Listen to what he said about this. Listen to this.
When the individual mandate is being repealed, that means Obamacare is being repealed because they get their money from the individual mandate. So the individual mandate is being repealed. So in this bill, not only do we have massive tax cuts and tax reform, we have essentially repealed Obamacare.
So is the president right, Senator, that
No,
with the repeal of the
right.
individual mandate that was included in this tax legislation, is Obamacare, as we know it, for all practical purposes, dead?
No, of course it is not. But Obamacare, forget Obamacare, forget the American people. 13 million Americans will lose their health insurance as a result of the repeal of the individual mandate. Now, that people get really excited, isn't that a great thing, Wolf? My God. 13 million more Americans on top of the 28 million who have no health insurance are going to lose their health insurance. Let's really celebrate that. I mean, what kind of insanity is that? We are the only major country on earth not to guarantee health care to all people. We pay twice as much per capita for health care as any other nation, and Trump is celebrating the fact that 13 more million Americans will not have any health insurance. And by the way, another disastrous aspect of this bill is that when younger people and healthier people are no longer in the universal pool, what all of the experts say is that health care premiums are going to go up significantly. So not only are 83% of the benefits, tax benefits, going to the top 1% at the end of 10 years, health care premiums are going up. That is one of the reasons why AARP, the largest senior group in America, has opposed this legislation.
Senator, a very related issue now. The deadline, as you know, to pass a spending bill is Friday, or else the government will have to shut down. It looks like it will be another short-term continuing resolution, as it's called. December 7th, that was the last CR, continuing resolution, that avoided a government shutdown. You were one of 14 votes against that one. Will you vote against this continuing resolution as well?
I sure will. Look.
Why?
How many hours do you have? Here's why. We have a situation today where 800,000 young people, dreamers, people who were raised in the United States, who are now at school, who are now working, who are now in the United States military, are on the verge of losing their legal status and will be subjected to deportation. Just a poll came out, I believe, yesterday, Quinnipiac poll. 77% of the American people, Democrats, Republicans, independents, understand that the right thing to do is to maintain the legal status of these young people and, in fact, move them toward citizenship. That's what 77% of the American people want. Republicans have been so busy trying to give huge tax breaks to billionaires and the wealthy, they haven't paid one iota of attention to this looming crisis. Second of all, we have the CHIP program. This is the health insurance program for children. For children. Has not been reauthorized in almost 3 months. There are states now running out of money. Children in this country, middle class, working class kids, are going to lose their health insurance. Furthermore, you got the community health center program, something that I've been very actively involved in expanding. 27 million low-income working class families get their health care through community health centers. That has not been refunded this fiscal year.
All right, Senator, let me interrupt because we're out of time. So basically, you're going to vote against it unless those, let's say, 3 issues and other issues are included, which apparently they won't be included, but there probably will be more than enough senators to vote in favor without that, and deal with those other issues in January or down the road, the DACA program, the Dreamers,
they have got to be dealt with.
The CHIP program.
Look, maybe, I know this is a radical idea, but maybe the Republican leadership might want to worry about the needs of the working class and middle class of this country, not just their billionaire campaign contributors. So I will vote no unless those issues are dealt with.
Senator Sanders, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you very much, Wolf.
Up next, Republican Senator